We're going to be learning today how to elicit the unconscious metaphors we use for our problems or stuck states, and then through this awareness, gain some insight, I hope, into why our attempted solutions aren't working and what might actually work better. The Metaphors of Movement process was developed by Andrew T. Austin of the UK, and it's a very recent development. He's still working on this. Over the past about 4 years, we've been bringing him into Boulder, Colorado, and he does a full 4-day training on this way of working. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you all to think of some problem or stuck state in your life, some place where you feel stuck, blocked, held back, that kind of thing. And I'm going to ask you, what is it like? This whole experience, what is it like? And you hear these kinds of metaphors in everyday language all the time, right? And mostly we just let them pass, or we don't pay all that much attention to them. But these metaphors actually hold an immense amount of information about our internal experience. When we hear people say things like, I'm taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I'm hitting roadblocks, it's like I've come up against a brick wall, or slamming my head against a wall, I'm in the pit of despair, I'm stuck in a rut, I'm walking in circles, I'm just trying to keep my head above water, I'm treading water. You hear these all the time, right? Maybe some of you have some that are coming to mind now that I'm just saying a few of these off the top of my head. There's loads of these all the time, and I hope that after today you'll start to hear these, how much people use these metaphors unconsciously. And I'd like to share another example of somebody that I worked with recently. He said, you know what, it's like I'm going around in circles, and I'm just treading the same ground over and over again. And so I said, which way are you going in circles? And he said, counterclockwise. He had that immediate sense, oh, counterclockwise. So I drew a picture like this. He's just kind of going counterclockwise. And I asked him a little bit more about it. I said, what are you standing on? And he said, well, it's like I'm standing on like the square of concrete, just going around in circles. And there's like nothing on all sides. And then he goes, actually, there is a sense of a river behind me, but it stops. That was his experience. So we've got this square of concrete and a river flowing like this. Another woman I worked with just a few days ago, she sat down and she said, you know, it's like I just feel this adrenaline. It's like I'm fighting, and every time they switch up on the schedule on me, I've got all this much more work to do, and blah, 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 blah. And she went into the story. And so often that's how it is. There'll be a little snippet of a metaphor in there, and then there'll be all the story and the feelings and that kind of thing. So I honed in on that metaphor because we're not interested in this exercise in the story of the real life context or how it makes you feel. And I asked her, so when you have that adrenaline, it's like you're fighting. What is that like? And she goes, well, it's like I'm running on a treadmill just to stay in the same place. So that was interesting. Her first metaphor was like I'm fighting, but when we really got to the experience of it, that primary process experience it was like she was running on a treadmill just to stay in one place. And so I said, that's really interesting. What kind of treadmill is it? And she goes, well, actually, it's a wheel. Like I'm inside this wheel. And I'm just running, it's all I can do just to stay in place in this wheel. And this thing is spinning like that. And she said, I feel really small, and there's wood shavings in the wheel. So we'll come back to that, but you might already start to have some ideas about this metaphor. So go ahead and set down your pens. If you like, you can close your eyes if that helps. And just think of some problem, some situation in your life where you feel stuck, blocked, held back. Go ahead and just think of the whole thing, the whole big mess. The whole sorry saga. What is it like? So do some of you have some examples you'd like to share? So in the metaphor, it's like you're laying down and covered with layers of dirt. Like one of those toys where, you know, everything, it always springs back, right? It never goes anywhere, it's round on the bottom. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So he's on an island and he can see this bigger landmass on the other side of the water, right? So we've got somebody who's buried underground, like layers of ground. Maybe there's like a hand reaching up. I'm not quite sure how to draw this one, but it's like one of those. Yeah. Then we have an island, somebody on an island, and nothing, and then a bigger landmass over here. Any other people who'd like to share? Yeah. Swimming upstream. There's like a flow here. With this one, you're swimming upstream. When things are good, you're actually going with the flow, right? There's another expression that we hear a lot.
I have to tell you, this is really weird, but just that one thing that I said, and then after I thought about it, really made some things clear to me.
Interesting. Yeah, and so sometimes just eliciting the metaphor, some certain things start to make sense in a different kind of way. So here's where this can start getting even more fun, is that we can learn to respond to these metaphors in common idioms, like I was using before. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, all this kind of thing. When we respond to the metaphor in metaphor, then we're in the same communication channel as the experience of the problem. And really interesting things can happen. So with this person here, I was wanting to explore this more cleanly before this presentation, so I asked him not to share any information about his actual problem and just share the metaphor. And this is what he said, as I described. So I just said something like, well, it looks like you've been really going with the flow for a while, maybe a long time. And he's nodding along, and that may have been fairly easy for you. However, you had no real control over where you were going to end up, and you may have not even known where you were headed. And now you've washed up here in no man's land. For the first time, you're grounded. You can take steps of your own, but you don't know which way to go and which steps to take. And so it's been rather counterproductive, in fact. And you just kind of taking the same steps over and over again, going in circles. And he said, this is like you're clairvoyant. And I said, well, I am. Who of you who've already shared some of your metaphor would like to explore some idioms together? Okay, great. So you're waiting for somebody to give you a hand. You might be waiting a long time, depending on where you are.
Down forever.
Oh, okay. So she said it goes down forever on the right. Oh, all around. Oh, so this is what we have. So now it makes sense why you're worried about getting sucked down into the, if you've been trying to move, but that's maybe not the best idea. That could be really dangerous. That could be a big letdown. And so this one was particularly interesting to me. This was just 3 days ago. So I'm really curious to hear what she reports back after several days. So I explored this one. I said, it looks to me like you're in a bit of a rat race. It's like a hamster wheel. And she's nodding, and I said, and it's a pretty difficult rat race because there's no end to it. I mean, you're just looking forward to the same cycle repeating itself over and over and over again, and it's all you can do just to stay where you are, just to stay in one place, and it's a lot of work. Something I didn't tell you is so this was blocked in on both sides. There was like a cage kind of thing. But she did have handles on each side. So I said, but at least you've got a handle on the situation. And you've got a firm grasp of what's going on. So just keep going. She didn't think that was a very good solution. So I asked her a little bit more about this, and I said, what keeps this thing spinning? What keeps it moving? And she said, I have no idea. And she checked, and she said, I have this sense of it's like this big machinery. Maybe there's like some big mechanistic thing outside my view that's keeping the whole thing going. And I said, maybe. I don't know either. And you can't see outside, so who knows? But do you have any other ideas? And she checked in, and she said, well, I get the sense that maybe it's like hidden under these wood shavings. And the wood shavings, by the way, were like a foot thick, which I didn't know at first. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I said, I think you're right about that. I think it is hidden under those wood shavings. And she goes, I just don't know what it is. So I said, well, I think it's the same thing as what keeps a hamster wheel moving. And she said, I've never seen a hamster wheel. I don't know what that is. Like, I don't know what keeps it moving. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I said, well, your problem is you need to get a hamster. That's the, you know. She, so she didn't like that either. And she said, I'm not paying you until you tell me what the answer is. So I said, I think you're right, that it's something underneath these wood shavings that's keeping it, something hidden under these wood shavings that's keeping it going. I said, there's one thing that I know is hidden under those wood shavings, and I know that you know is hidden under those wood shavings, and that's your own feet. And she slapped the sides of her chair and she said, of course. Oh, like, how did I not see that? And interestingly enough, before she came in, she said, I know I'm creating this myself. So she had a conscious understanding already that she was creating it. Yet in the metaphor, that conscious knowing did not translate into her experience of the problem. She knew consciously what was going on, and yet that did her no good. That to me is a clear sign that this is communicating in a different mode. It's communicating right brain experientially how the problem is experienced. So I said, okay, so see what, most people's problem is they're not taking enough steps, or they don't know which way to take steps. They're not sure which way to go, what's the right direction for them, or they don't know what order to take the steps in. In your case, you're taking too many steps, and you need to take fewer steps. And so I said, close your eyes and just notice what it's like when you take fewer steps. And begin to slow down and just see what happens. And so she did that, and she said, oh, okay, yeah, the wheel's slowing down. And pretty soon she was standing there, and she was very relieved. And she said, oh my gosh, it's like I can breathe again for the first time. And interestingly, too, she had this real pain in her neck that had been going a long time. That also went away. Wouldn't have expected that, but it did. So she's still trapped in a hamster wheel, but she's a lot happier at least. So there's more to this, to eventually solving this problem, but at that point, that was enough. I didn't want to go too far with this. And that was a big insight for her. And so I hope as you leave here today, listen in on these different metaphors and realize that they're telling you a whole lot about somebody's experience. And there's a lot to be learned there. So there's a ton more than what I presented today. Thanks so much. It was really enjoyable exploring. And this is my website, markandreas.com, where you can find out more about me. I have a blog with sharing tools and interesting tips. And this is the info on our trainings that we do in Boulder, where we have Andy for a full 4-day training.